So I just want to start by first thanking you, Dr. Tassone, for your time, for joining us today. I know that you have a very large following and you are very busy. And so the fact that you're willing to share an hour of your day today with us is incredible. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So Dr. Shawn Tassone is an MD. He's a physician down in the States. He has both an MD in obstetrics and gynecology. He's known as America's holistic doctor, and also a PhD in integrative medicine. So I've been following you for a while now on Instagram. I think I originally heard you speak on a podcast, and I can't remember which one. But for a while, I've been following you on Instagram, and I find your content always so informative and educational. And edgy, very interesting, flames behind and all sorts of fun things. So
you have to.
And when I read the comments, I just see over and over how much help and support you've provided women who haven't been able to get support by their regular physician. So I'm really, really excited for this conversation. And if I ever look distracted, it's because I'm letting people into the room here. So anyway, so welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I read your book, The Hormone Balance Bible. I see it in the background. I also have it here. So if anyone's interested, I've shared it already in our group, but it's a very interesting read and I find it very fresh. I love how you bring in archetypes and share patient stories. That makes possibly what we're going through in our symptoms very relatable, and also in terms of making sense of what might be happening in our bodies with excess or deficient hormones. It just helps, I think the archetypes help all this make more sense. So I'm really excited to talk about that too today, because I did do a poll, and I'm sure a lot of the ladies have questions about the results they got too. So I will introduce myself as well in case people are watching this in other channels and aren't familiar with who I am. My name is Rebecca Garland, and I'm the founder of Elan Performance. The group right now that I'm leading is called the Plant-Strong Sculpt, and we are focused on fitness and nutrition, but also bringing in a lot of hopefully educational and informational stuff about midlife and hormones during this time, and what used to work for us in the past: exercise harder, more intensely, HIIT sessions, the trends that are happening right now. Those aren't necessarily what we need. Those aren't necessarily what will support us now in midlife and beyond. So we need to do things a little bit differently. So that's our focus in this group. Yeah. Okay, so can I just start by saying, in this book, for everybody, in this book, one of the things that I love about this is currently, I think when we think of menopause, it feels very dreaded. Yes. The idea of menopause, midlife, all the symptoms, hot flashes, the belly fat, everything that goes along with it feels very dreaded. And what I really love about this is the hero's journey that you speak of, Dr. T.
Yeah.
The hero's journey and the call to adventure. So could we start with that?
Yeah, and I have some books that I wrote on pregnancy years ago that hero's journey thing kind of is persistent in a lot of what I talk about and how I look at things, whether it's pregnancy, which is obviously the heroine's journey. And Joseph Campbell did a lot of work in that area, but he never really talked about women. It was more about men. Mm-hmm. Which isn't a shock, I suppose. But that being said, I think what is more relatable than me talking about your numbers or your hormone levels or your symptoms sometimes is relating it to what I found was that when I would talk to women in a more of a story that I had been hearing for 20 years, so I took all those visits and just kind of melded them into 12, what I felt were the 12 most common imbalances that I was seeing and persistent storylines. And so when I started talking to patients in those threads, in those journeys, it just was like light bulbs were going off. And it was like this connecting, if you will. And almost like the acknowledgement, I think, was big because so many women are being told that their hormones are normal. They just need to lose weight. They're just getting older, blah, blah, blah. And they're not being acknowledged that they don't feel good and that they should feel good. That's the other piece of that is like, you shouldn't feel miserable, right? So that's kind of why I use the stories is because I think they resonate.
Yeah, absolutely. I sure found that. Um, can we, I don't even know if I've done this myself, and I feel like I should have at the very beginning of this, but I think I might have just made an assumption that everybody knows what these terms mean. Can you help just define premenopause, perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause? What do these terms mean?
I think we could just make it super easy and say perimenopause and menopause. Perimenopause is the time around menopause. So that for most women is probably somewhere around 35 to 52, somewhere around there. And menopause is when you stop having periods for about 12 months and your hormones are low. That's average age in this country is 51. The only other term that's really of value is something called premature ovarian failure, which is menopause in a sense before the age of 40. So technically, by definition, menopause is not abnormal medically if it's after the age of 40.
Okay. And can you say that one more time?
Which part? The term premature ovarian failure.
Okay.
And I'm talking medically. So lay terms, yeah, you can say premenopause, perimenopause. Perimenopause just means you're not in menopause, but you're around menopause.
Right.
Which for a lot of, which kind of is almost like, technically your entire life. But I mean, you're perimenopausal when usually I start seeing that probably around that 35 to 45 age range. And then menopause is technically by definition when you haven't had a period in 12 months. You can check two hormones called LH and FSH, which are from the pituitary gland. If those are elevated and you have symptoms, and you also have low progesterone, low estrogen, then that's probably menopause, even if it hasn't been 12 months.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay, great. So what I'd like to do is go through some of these questions, and every once in a while, I'm just going to pause and see if anyone has a question. I'll look to the chat. So welcome to a few of you who've just joined. I've shared earlier that this will be shared. So in terms of questions, if you want to remain confidential, please post your questions in the chat and I'll read them. But this will be shared more publicly. Okay, I'm really curious, and I heard this from my instructor, who you know. So Deborah Atkinson is the course instructor of the fitness menopause certification course that I took, which kind of inspired a lot of what I'm bringing into this course. And one of the things that I'd never heard of before that I loved, there was two insights, and I in our conversation prior to this, you mentioned that you know her and she's a client of yours. So I'm really curious to hear if you would add to anything. But it often can feel like our bodies are working against us, especially when it comes to weight. So one of the things that I did not know about was as estrogen levels fall, the increased weight or the weight gain that can be very difficult to take off is bone protective.
Is what protective? I didn't hear that
Bone
part.
protective.
I still can't hear you.
Bone.
Oh, okay, right. So as far as bones go, the things that, and I guess you want me to answer that with regards to hormones or things you can do to protect your bones?
Well, just, I just really liked how it shifted my mindset around what's happening. So going from our bodies are working against us, why are they doing this? Making our lives miserable, to actually, possibly it's more the beauty standards, it's our culture that's working against us, and our body is trying to protect us. Yeah. So the extra fat that might be going on isn't necessarily a bad thing if it's protecting our bones, for instance. So I just kind of want to open that conversation, right, anywhere with that.
Yeah, so I always tell women, typically what I see over and over and over again, 45 to 55 years old, 10-pound weight gain, always around the belly. That's typical, classic, see it all the time. And what I've tried to get across is that, instead of being upset about it and beating yourself up about it, your body is trying to protect you. That the body wants to live. Okay, that's what it's programmed to do. And so, in order to protect you from osteoporosis, which is a pretty big deal, and heart disease, there's two reasons why you would hang on to fat. One is you're heavier, so that does stress your bones. So, if you're gaining weight and you're in that kind of perimenopause, menopause stage, it's because your body's preparing for the lack of estrogen. Just like when we gain weight, it's because we're preparing for the next famine, which is never going to happen really, but that's what our body does, is store fat. The other thing that fat does is the two good things fat does. One is it stresses bones, and two, it makes estrogen. So if you're low in estrogen and your body wants estrogen, it's going to hang on to the fat because the fat is what's going to make the estrogen. So I can't tell you how many times I'm not eating a lot, I'm exercising, and I can't lose this 10 pounds. And it's probably because there's something going on hormonally and there could be other things going on, but realistically, hormonally, if that's what we're focusing on, your body's just saying, hey, I don't want to let go of this fat. If we get estrogen levels back up into more of a normal range, I've often found that it's easier for your body to let go of that extra fat if you're doing the things you should be doing.
Yeah, great. Okay, I'm seeing some questions come in already. And what are some things, we're focused on the lifestyle, so exercise and nutrition. I'd love to kind of maintain that focus, but if there's anything else, that we should be aware of or to talk to our physicians about. But with respect to helping support our estrogen in this stage, what recommendations do you give?
To support estrogen in which stage?
Well, just midlife, like 35 and beyond, in perimenopause.
I think the main thing is maintaining a healthy weight, working out, making sure that your bowels function properly so that you can detoxify your estrogens that you have in your body, because you detoxify those through the liver and then through the gut. And so you want to have healthy gut, and bowel movements are the way to do that. And then to maintain obviously healthy weight, because fat makes estrogen. So if you have more fat cells, you could potentially make more estrogen, and then more estrogen makes insulin resistance, which then adds to weight, and it can be this horrible cycle. So yeah, I would say those two things, nutrition, obviously, and exercise are going to be huge in that. And then sometimes, it depends. If you have high estrogen but low progesterone throughout most of your life, sometimes to block the effects of the estrogen, we might want to add progesterone or something along those lines. So there's a lot of pieces of that puzzle that can go in there. And somebody asked earlier, post-menopause, what is the definition? So post-menopause would be, I joke about this, but it means after menopause, which would basically mean death. So, because you're technically menopausal your whole life, right? I mean, after you hit menopause, you're always in menopause. I mean, so we're fixing the menopause because of the hormones, but you're technically still in that menopausal stage. So there really isn't anything after menopause.
Yeah, I think we use a lot of like premenopause. Premenopause is pretty much like children and adolescents. Like that's all.
That's what I'm saying. We use all these words, but technically it's premature ovarian failure, perimenopause, menopause. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Okay. That keeps it simple. Thank you. So there's another question. I have read that while all things stay the same, both blood pressure and cholesterol levels increase in menopause. How concerning is this, and best ways to address?
Well, the number one cause of death in women is heart disease. So it's obviously really important. That's why I would recommend, getting your doctor's visits once a year and all that stuff. Cholesterol changes in women. Women tend to have higher cholesterol than men in perimenopause and adolescence because estrogen raises high density lipoproteins, or HDLs, and it lowers LDL. So actually, I have a lot of women that will come see me because their cholesterol is high, but it's because their good cholesterol is really high and their LDLs are actually pretty good. So don't just focus on the cholesterol number because it's not the number, it's all the pieces that go into that. So sometimes, so a woman who's in menopause who doesn't go on hormones has the same risk factors of heart attack as a man does at that point in her life because she's losing the protective benefits of the estrogen. And so blood pressure also would more than likely be because the hormones help with the vessel wall pliability. And so the vessels probably become a little stiffer during menopause if you're not on estrogen because of the smooth muscle. And so those two things could go up. But usually if a woman goes back on her hormones, the risks of heart disease go back down to where they were before she was in menopause.
Okay. Yeah. I've been learning or hearing a lot more about, what shifted in terms of the hormone replacement therapy. And I think it was the Women's Health Initiative of 2002, that study that came out, and all of a sudden that overnight almost, it sounded like the recommendations for hormone therapy turned around. And now I don't know how many years it's been since that's been starting to change again. But I don't know if we want to go there, if there's time, maybe we can come back to that at the end, because I'm sure people would like to hear more about hormone therapy. But I would love to make sure that we cover in our short period of time for some of the archetypes. So you mentioned there's 3 main ones that you see in your patients. I'd love to cover those briefly. But I also wanted to make sure that we touch upon the ones in our group. So I'm just pulling it up. I think the main one that I saw, like most people, are the unbalanced heroine. There was 3 that were also, so they got both the unbalanced heroine and the wise woman.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was like a bunch of others were just single people. So I'd love to just maybe start with your top 3 and then make sure that we also address the unbalanced heroine and wise woman.
Top 3 are testosterone deficiency, which is the nun. Number 2 would be estrogen dominance, which is the queen. And number 3 is the underdog, which is hypothyroidism. Those would be the top 3. And I think that pans out as well from looking at, if I had 100 women take the test and I had those 100 women do blood testing, the results would be pretty similar. So as far as the wise woman is just that woman in menopause. So the unbalanced heroine is low progesterone, which kind of falls under the umbrella of wise woman because that's low progesterone too. So so some of them fall under the auspices of others. And then there's 3 archetypes that I actually combined some of the others. So like the philosopher, a lot of women in menopause are the philosopher because they are the wise woman combined with the nun. And so those 2 together make the philosopher, because women in menopause have low progesterone, low estrogen, and low testosterone most of the time. But the 3 single ones that are the most common are the nun, the queen, and the underdog.
Okay. Can we dive into those symptoms and then recommendations?
So in my book, those of you that have it, each of the 12 imbalances, I have a 6-step protocol, not really steps, but you can pick and choose any one of them. SHINES is the acronym because you really got to have a cool acronym nowadays. And SHINE stands for spiritual practice. So let's take, for instance, the nun. The nun would be, when does being a nun or having testosterone deficiency become a negative? Well, when you are a nun, if you're cloistered, meaning you stay inside all the time, you don't ever go out and you don't ever do anything, you're kind of, people are asking you to do stuff. So for me, the negative aspect of the nun would be you're cloistering yourself inside and you're not going out and doing things. So a spiritual practice for that would be going outside, walking in the sun for 20, 30 minutes a day. Hormones, that's the H. So hormones, obviously, for the nun or testosterone deficiency would be testosterone replacement. And that can be creams or sublingual tablets, however you want to do it. I'm not a fan of pellets. Anybody that stays on my Instagram page for more than a week will figure that part out. I'm not a huge fan of those. The I is infoceuticals, and that's kind of a conglomeration term. Infoceutical to me means energetic information transferred to the body. And that can be through acupuncture, essential oils, Reiki, healing touch, massage. And so I will have some recommendations for those, clary sage or some other things. I have a really good friend, Marisa Snyder, who's written a lot about essential oils and women's health. So I've used her information to share that. And then the N is nutrition, which is probably one of the biggest pieces. And for nuns, they're dealing more with muscle loss and slow metabolism. So working on getting them high protein, high fat, probably low processed carbohydrate intake to really get their muscle mass going again. So that's the N. The E is exercise. For a nun, obviously, we're going to want to focus on weightlifting and resistance training. So cardio, maybe swimming, doing some weights that, things like Deb, and that doesn't have to be weights. It can be body weight. You can do lunges, you can do push-ups, things like that. And then the final S is supplements. And so some people want to try different supplements. And so for each of the 12 archetypes, I have some supplement recommendations that can help.
Yeah. And just to go back to the exercise for a moment, because this was a big part of, the course that I took. Is there any recommendations that you have for like the kind of exercise, not just strength training or cardio, but intensity, or like I'm thinking more power, speed, higher intensity, shorter bursts?
It changes. So for somebody that, let's say a low cortisol patient, which I call the saboteur, those women are really burned out. And they're usually burned out because before they hit the saboteur archetype, they were the workaholic archetype, which is high cortisol. And so they burned out. And so the last thing I want that woman worrying about is high intensity interval training, because she's fried. She has nothing left. And so for her, and I will talk about this because Deb actually did a YouTube video on this where I go through her labs with her. And one of the recommendations that I had for Deb, because she was a saboteur, because she runs her own business and she's working out all the time. And I had to tell Deb not to work out. I actually told her, I'm like, why don't you not work out for a while? And she's like, well, that's what I do. And I'm like, well, that's why you are where you are. Mm-hmm. And so she stopped, or she really cut back on the cardio and stuff that she was doing. And she actually lost 7 pounds. So versus somebody who has a lot of weight gain and they are the queen, which is high estrogen, I probably would recommend for them to do high intensity interval training because that's what they need to do. And I think when women think of HIIT, they're thinking like, oh, I've got to sprint, like you said, but you could walk fast. I mean, for everybody's different and where they come into this. So it's not necessarily, it's just high intensity for you, whatever that is. And then for weights, I tend to recommend multi-joint exercises. So things like lunges and squats, rather than just doing biceps. You can do those on other days, but you really want to focus on the big muscle groups, the glutes, the quads, that those are really going to change your metabolism.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just back to the specifics. So the nun with the low testosterone, what helps to support or build that testosterone? Because for instance, so in with Deb in her course, she was sharing just how much cardio, like, as women, we have been told more cardio. So there's a lot of women who are cardio junkies out there trying to lose weight, but driving their testosterone into the ground, really. So just to be really specific with the testosterone piece, is there anything else?
If you look at a side-by-side picture of a sprinter versus a marathoner, right? Yeah. The marathoners look sick and the sprinters have these big legs. And it's because they're doing high intensity training. So versus a marathoner, which is a long haul, slow burn kind of thing. And they have higher rates of osteoporosis because they weigh nothing. it's well known that runners, long distance runners, have more osteoporosis, even men. It's just, I don't think there's anything wrong with running, obviously, because it does help with weight loss and it's good for cardio. But high intensity stuff is, better, and for muscle mass, for gaining muscle. Just the sheer aspect of lifting the weight or doing and that's why I say, if you're cardio, do a Peloton, or because that's resistance. You're using those big muscles to use your resistance. Do some swimming, it's great cardio and it's also resistance training. So you're getting both at the same time versus running, 6 or 7 miles. And for me, a lot of the times in my practice, trying to shift the mindset of a long distance runner might be one of the hardest things you have to do sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I have one lady, one of the best resistance training things I've ever seen. And she's a long distance patient. She comes out here once a year to see me. She lives in, I want to say she lives in the north somewhere, but there's a lot of snow all the time. And so she does cross country skiing. And that's like one of the toughest. That's a great combo of resistance, and especially going up hills and stuff. And so you can adapt it to your environment too. But yeah, I think that's hard, is getting women, even look at Deb, I mean, she thinks in her mind, and she's smart as hell, but it's like, but she's so programmed to bust her butt all the time, to think to take a few weeks off. Oh my gosh, that was a crazy recommendation, but it's what she needed.
Yeah. And she does have a TED Talk, if anyone wants to Google it. She has a TED Talk where she really does promote the lower intensity, recovery focus, taking time off. So in this program, which is very much like it's a blend of strength training as well as nutrition, and the cardio recommendations are lists. They're low intensity, steady state. So it's been interesting for those who are really used to a lot of cardio or a lot of HIIT training, that these recommendations are really trying to cut people, ease people back from that, just for these 8 weeks to focus more on the strength build. And I think that this is a really important time, because we probably, and you can please correct me if I'm wrong, but we probably have the most testosterone that we're ever going to have, and it's going to continue kind of going down as we age. So testosterone is what helps build muscle. And, after the age of 35, I think the stats are the rates of sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle wasting, is, what is it, 1.5% to 2%, or 2.5% per year after the age of 35. So now's the time to build muscle, build as much muscle as you can while you can, and make use of the testosterone that you have. So that's a little bit of where I'm coming from, and I would love your thoughts on that.
I think if there's one thing that you could do if every pound of muscle burns about 50 calories a day just sitting on the couch. So metabolically, and another one of my friends that's really into this, and she's got a lot of great information, is Dr. Gabrielle Lyon on Instagram. She talks a lot about, or Dr. Stephanie Estima. She's a good resource too. They really get into the how, what proteins are good for you versus what type of exercises to do. And the thing that's great, I think, about this type of stuff is knowing that I'm not an expert in probably muscle mass building. That's just not my area of expertise, but I have friends like Deb and Gabrielle and some of the others that are good at that. And so I would recommend looking at some of their stuff. I think it's, you already probably look at Deb, but it's good to get multiple pieces of information. So I think, if you could focus, and the other thing, that if the more muscle you build, the less chances of osteoporosis as well. So I think women are afraid, at least when I talk to them about testosterone, for a couple of things. One is they think testosterone is going to make them lose their hair, when the reality, or make them hairy. But the reality is, too little or too high testosterone, hair follicles are very androgenic, so they like testosterone. So if you have practically zero, you're going to have some hair thinning. If it's too high, like on pellets, you could have crazy hair growth. But if it's in the normal range and it's just a little more in the middle, women see hair come back like amazing. It's a really great way to help with hair loss. So there's things out there too that can help that you might not even think about, bringing your testosterone levels up to more of a normal level.
Right. Huh. Okay, great. The queen. Okay. So we talked about the nun a little bit. Can we get into the queen a bit more?
Yeah, so the queen is just it's debatable. There's a lot of allopathic doctors on Instagram that think hormone imbalance is kind of a stupid term, and they're just getting bogged down in the semantics. There are times in a woman's life when hormones being out of whack are normal: puberty, pregnancy, menopause. Those are all normal states. They may suck, but they're normal states, right? So I'm talking about hormone imbalances when, like, let's say with the queen, your estrogen's high and it's causing you problems. Like, you can't live your life the way that you want to live your life because something's out of whack. See this a lot in women that have polycystic ovarian syndrome, where they're not ovulating regularly. And so they don't make that progesterone all the time. And so what happens is their estrogen levels are always elevated and their progesterone levels tend to always be lower. And that makes insulin not work as well. So you get some insulin resistance. When you have insulin resistance, then your body has to make more insulin so that it works. And then what does insulin do? It stores fat and it can eat some muscle. So so the women that have this issue tend to have more obesity or be overweight, irregular, heavy, painful periods, breast tenderness, mood swings, hair loss, pre-diabetic, stuff like that.
Okay, so well, actually, I was going to say, can we get into some of the shine recommendations for the queen? But since nobody is the queen in this group, maybe we can skip forward to the, not the underdog, the unbalanced heroine.
Yeah, so that's progesterone deficiency. And the reason that I called it the unbalanced heroine is because, to me, the ultimate hero's journey for a female is pregnancy, or at least it's synonymous with the hero's journey, because not only does your body physically change, but you cross over into a different state of being, in a sense. And the number one hormone in pregnancy is progesterone. So if the progesterone isn't great, you're still a hero. You're just a little unbalanced. Those women tend to be more insomniacs, edgy, like I don't want to offend anybody, but I jokingly call it choke a bitch syndrome, where you feel like you want to choke pump people out, but they may not deserve it. And sometimes they do deserve it, but if they don't deserve it, a classic example of an unbalanced heroine, sitting in the kitchen.
I have an example.
Yeah. Sitting in the kitchen and one of your kids spills something and you flip around and you like go ballistic. And then you feel bad because you totally overreacted. Come in, talk about it, ends up putting her on progesterone. The same scene happens after she's on progesterone, and she turns around and the kids are racing for impact. And she says, "Oh, don't worry, I got it." And the 12-year-old says, "What have you done with my mother?" So it makes you, when you have the progesterone, the things that normally set you off, you can deal with them better. So it's like every little thing can set you off. I mean, I've had women come in crying because they're tired of just feeling that way. They don't like feeling on edge. It can cause more anxiety. It can cause depression. So progesterone is a very calming hormone. It's a hormone that upregulates GABA receptors in your brain, which are receptors that calm you down and they help you sleep. And so if you're not sleeping, that's the other thing for these women. If they don't sleep, that can raise your cortisol, that can raise your blood sugars, that can gain weight. So there's all kinds of ramifications on the other side of that.
Wow. So I'm going to share something very personal, and I know this is being shared, so a lot of people are getting a glimpse into my personal life here. But so I'm on the birth control pill, Lolo, and that has removed my period entirely, which I'm extremely happy about, because my symptoms were like very extreme prior, and it was hard to live my life, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
But prior, I remember like once a month. And I finally realized it was a hormonal thing, because I didn't realize the monthly cycle until I don't know how many years I was together with my husband. But once a month for about 3 days, I wanted to divorce him, and it was serious, like so serious that I was questioning our relationship for the rest of the month. Like, am I just settling? Am I just for some reason being okay the rest of the month, but I'm just not really wanting to address what's really going on? And for those 3 days, oh my gosh, it was like, what have I done? I've made the biggest mistake of my life. I can't live like this. I see no future with this person. But for the rest of the month, it's like, I made the best decision, but I don't understand why I'm so upset the other days. It's fine. So I don't know. This was many years ago. I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s. So I was getting a regular menstrual cycle at that time. And but I'm after hearing you speak, I'm thinking that I was probably having some pretty major progesterone valleys.
Yeah, I mean, you still have a period because you're making progesterone, but maybe for you it wasn't enough. And what it does, I feel like, is it takes something that might already be there. Like maybe, you had that little kernel in there, but the lack of progesterone, it just magnifies it 100-fold. And it then after a while, yeah, it just turns into more of a problem because you're constantly aware of it.
Mhm.
So it can take anything that you have going on and just really magnify it. And then it also adds to that irritability and depression, anxiety. And so that then feeds into everything you were just talking about.
Hormones are so powerful. So powerful. I think with all the coaching work and the skills, we can have cognitive behavior therapy, and we can have mindfulness and all these wonderful tools and skills. But hormones really, they drive the bus.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, the definition of a hormone is a chemical messenger. And so if you're not getting the message in this instance to calm down, to relax, to feel good, you're constantly going to be, I kind of look at it like this, you're constantly being overstimulated. And then you don't have the benefit for those other 2 weeks where the calming comes in and you're able to, so you're stimulated over months, or not getting enough of a calming response. If your cells aren't getting that message, then yeah, it's going to make you more, unstable in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I do see a question and I'd like to come back to it. So I just want to finish in terms of the SHINE protocol. If we could focus on nutrition and exercise for the unbalanced heroine before we move to the next thing, because there was the majority of the people in this group were the imbalanced heroine. So in terms of your SHINE protocol, nutrition and exercise recommendations.
I think the nutrition is going to be something very similar. First of all, I would probably tell women not to stress out, because here's the thing, most of them are already on edge. So try not to stress out about, cooking for everybody. It maybe use one day a week where you're doing your meal prep, and instead of trying to worry about it every day, maybe get your partner, if you have one, involved with meals and groceries to take that off of your plate, but to then focus on, really good quality fats. I would probably say more of a 40-40 protein and fat content, and then limiting your carbs. I think women feel better when their blood sugars are more stable. And so by not necessarily going keto, because I think that could make you actually more miserable sometimes, but really reducing your carbohydrate intake and just getting your carbs through vegetables is probably the best. And then exercise wise, a lot of the times I have found those women feel better with more high intensity or even longer duration, low intensity training, because you want them to really get the endorphin hit, because the endorphins can help bring them back down and feel better overall. And they already kind of have a lot of energy to burn through. And so for a lot of those women, they'll tell me, like, if I can't get out and do my jog in the morning, I'm going to go nuts, because that's the one thing, because they can get to that point where they feel that zen, for whatever, if they're into it. But yeah, that's what I would recommend for them.
Okay. And that I don't think this is exactly what you're referring to, but just within this program, we have 2 lists a day that are recommended. So one in the morning, and then we've got the strength training, and then a list in the evening. The strength training program is 4 days a week, and the lists are 5-ish, so 5 to 6. And that's what I hear regularly. That was my experience, and that's what I hear regularly from people, is just like the 3 is very purposeful. The 3, getting outside, trying to be in nature if possible, if the weather's conducive, being surrounded by beauty, just helping get that endorphin hit, plus the movement 3 times a day is such a game changer for so many of us. So similar, a little bit different, but similar to what you just said.
That and just sunlight,
Yeah. Okay, great. So I'd like to also get to the underdog, because that was the other one. Actually, the underdog and the philosopher, but I'll take a moment for the question. Do you recommend getting hormones tested during perimenopause as a baseline if experiencing symptoms?
I was just going to leave it. I would always recommend testing for hormones if you're having symptoms. Doesn't matter if you're perimenopause or I have 16-year-olds that come in because they're having horrible periods and they're not sleeping and they're emotional. And so I'll draw hormones on young girls sometimes. But yeah, anytime you have an issue where you don't feel the way you want to feel and something's off and you want to know, then I would definitely get hormones checked. Yeah.
And in, just so everybody's aware, so in the book, The Hormone Balance Bible, Dr. Teague does say, this is like the quiz that you've all taken. That's a fabulous starting point. It will help direct maybe your conversation with your physician. So it's not in the place of testing or speaking to your physician, but it may just help you go in with a little bit more information so that you can have a more effective conversation and be a little bit more directive in the testing that you do. Did I understand that correctly?
Yep, that's exactly it.
Okay, I know we're almost up on time, but if I can ask about the underdog, maybe / the philosopher, you can choose whichever one you want to speak to based on what's more popular, but I would love to hear any SHINE protocol for those, or for one.
Well, obviously for the underdog, you're going to want to consume foods that are higher in iodine, sea vegetables. And, if your blood pressure is good, we do have iodine in our salt that they added. So if you eat regular salt, you'd have to eat a lot of it, but it can help a little bit.
And sorry, just to remind everybody, the underdog is the low thyroid.
Yeah. And realistically, there are some women that I've run into that use iodine. They'll use Lugol's iodine, where they'll put drops in water. The problem that I have with that is you could overdo it. And then you're hyperthyroid. So you can't really eat too much, probably sea vegetables, because I can't imagine anybody doing that. But so that would be a good place to start. Eggs are great in iodine. So just looking up those types of foods that are higher in iodine would be great. Philosopher is more of a menopausal, low testosterone thing. So for those women, we want to focus on obviously trying to keep them at a healthy body weight. So again, good proteins, and those women also use sarcopenia, osteopenia, so they're losing muscle and bone. So really getting protein levels up, not too high, because I would usually shoot for probably 100 grams of protein per pound of body weight, somewhere around there. I think women grossly underestimate or underdo the protein, and they don't eat enough protein.
We're focusing on that in this program.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to sometimes eat that much protein. So sometimes even using a good egg-based, plant-based, whey-based powder just to get an extra 25, 30 grams a day. If you like to do smoothies is a good way. And you can also then mix in your flaxseed oil or whatever you like to use on that, and chia seeds or whatever it is you like. And so for them, that's kind of the important part is eating, more protein-based foods, and then, avocado, things, good fats. And I think most women, if we can keep them away from processed carbs, it also depends on their body weight when they start. I mean, if you're a menopausal woman and you're 250 pounds versus 112 pounds, you might have a little bit of different dietary. I'd probably say the one that's 112 pounds, she's obviously fine eating what she's already eating, but maybe make sure she's eating the right macros.
Mhm. Okay, great. I feel like I could keep going for at least another few hours. But we're here up on time. So at 12:55 is when we end. And I'd like to honor everyone's time, and especially yours, because I know you've got a very busy day. So I just want to really thank you once again for joining me today. I'm really delighted and honored that you you joined us. Does anyone have any final comments, any takeaways that you'd like to share? You can put in the chat or unmute. We'll finish here. Looks like someone's, I'm trying not to use names because this will be shared. So I've seen someone chatting, putting something in the chat. Okay. All right. So we see thank yous. Okay. Thank you. All right. So the Hormone Balance Bible and the quiz, I've shared the link in a few different groups. So hop into that quiz if you haven't already. People are still receiving 2 emails, but I think that's going to be.
We're working on that.
Yeah. Okay. But what I've just been suggesting to people is just read both. And if you relate to both, follow the protocol kind of thing, or, just choose whichever one resonates or you can relate to most and follow that one. So does that sound reasonable?
Yep.
So the glitch is that you're getting 2, but it's not that it's just randomly.
There's always a glitch.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Well, one of them, if you relate, then go with that. Okay. Thank you so much. And I hope that everybody has a fabulous day.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for now.